So I'm Dr. Molly Maloof, and I do a lot of things, including having a medical practice oriented around optimizing the health of executives, entrepreneurs, and investors. But I also have been advising tech companies for the last 3 years, and I've worked with, I think, up to 17 companies now, either advising or consulting with, ranging from digital health, biotech, wearable technology. But this talk today is very much focused on food, technology, and wellness. And why am I here? Well, it's peak performance. And when I was in medical school, I found that my performance was really suffering from how poorly I was taking care of myself. I was drinking cups of espresso. I had a really erratic sleep schedule, pretty lazy nutrition. I would skip meals and get migraines. No exercise, no stress management, and really bad test anxiety as a result. And my first board exam score came back, and I thought, oh my God, this is not how smart I am. It was an average. So I went to a psychologist and I said, hey, what's wrong with me? Clearly I'm crazy, depressed, or I have anxiety. He goes, you're fine, you're just really stressed out. So take better care of yourself. And so I asked myself, what does that mean, to take better care of yourself? So I started doing research on evidence-based lifestyle medicine and found that the biggest changes that I made in my life, including cutting back on my coffee, getting regular sleep, really basic stuff like daily yoga, plant-based diet, meditation, led to my test anxiety pretty much evaporating and getting a 99th percentile on my second board exam. So my school said, how did you do that? And I said, well, I used lifestyle medicine to improve my health. And I ended up creating a course called Physician Heal Thyself, Evidence-Based Lifestyle. And part of the reason why I'm here is because I really am very passionate about people meeting their potential. But unfortunately, most people will never meet their full potential because they're held back by their physiology. In medicine, most doctors look at illness, and because of that, when you look at people and all you see is disease, you don't really think about wellness on a daily basis. But I realized that wellness is a science, and so I've created a practice around this because I believe that the future of medicine is actually understanding and quantifying what it means to have optimal health. Because right now, we're really suffering from a gigantic epidemic of chronic disease, and this is going to continue costing our country significant amounts of money and just really probably leading to the reversal of the lifespan extension that we've been seeing. And the drugs that we give people to treat these diseases end up causing nutritional deficiencies, which end up worsening their health in the first place. So I don't think that the drugs we have for treating things like diabetes and heart disease, I don't think that they're that good, and if they were effective, then everybody would be better. I actually think that what we need to focus on is nutrition, because the major risk factor for most chronic disease in our country is our diet. And this is from the Tufts School of Human Nutrition. It's the only standalone school at a university, and I go there for a lot of my recommendations and guidelines. And I got this from the dean, and I thought it was so beautiful to look at this, because the one thing that you should really focus the most on to improve your health and performance is your food. But unfortunately, most people who are low income and even middle income are consuming pretty low quality foods. And these low quality foods are leading to health problems. Metabolic disease prevention is actually really simple. You just have to follow the top 6 health behaviors. But if this was easy to do, then everybody would be healthy. Broad guidelines just don't work. I think if they worked, people wouldn't struggle so much to meet them. And it's taken me almost 32 years to have implemented all of these guidelines in my own life. So I know, and I'm an expert in this, so it's not easy. But what I found is that personalizing wellness really makes it more actionable. Using genetics and using laboratory data and using really comprehensive questionnaires, I find out what exercises my patients should be doing, what healthy fats should they be eating, what fruits and vegetables are best for their bodies, and if alcohol is going to help or hurt their performance. But metabolism is incredibly complex, even for me to manage. So I actually use software programs to help me interpret labs and genetics in order to make sense of all this data. Because there really isn't one size fits all for nutrition. The guidelines that are given out to everybody by the government really aren't to be followed because they don't work for everybody. You need to find out what works for you by self-experimentation and through measurement. because biology is really complex. This is pretty much the best picture I've seen of systems biology that really puts together how many inputs are affecting your health. And I think the next frontier is the exploration of not our social media, but our inner media. And right now when you go to your doctor, what do you get? You go once a year, you get a small panel of labs, and they tell you you're either normal or abnormal. And they say eat right or exercise more. But in the future, and in my practice, I think we're going to be doing many more lab testing, and we're going to be doing it multiple times a year. I do expanded clinical chemistry panels with multiple biomarkers, 70 to 90 biomarkers. I test for micronutrients, I do metabolomics, test for hormones, immune markers, the microbiome, and I do this multiple times a year, certain ones of these. And the information is interpreted on a spectrum of nuanced degrees of what is optimal or suboptimal or abnormal. And genomics is interpreted in the context of this data and the phenotypic data. Because I think that what you really need is this beautiful picture of human health that is actionable and personalized in order to make behavioral changes that are meaningful for you. Because you need to quantify these things to find out if your experiments are working or not. This picture is from the Institute of Systems Biology. I really have deep respect for Lee Hood and what he's doing there. But from what I've gathered from talking to them, genetics and the microbiome are these really exciting frontiers of medicine, but right now they're still not as actionable as we would like them to be. But they are useful. For example, this is my genetics of superoxide dismutase, which is an antioxidant in the body that helps basically it's an enzyme that helps fight infection and inflammation. And for the first time, I've measured my superoxide dismutase in my blood and found that it was, in fact, suboptimal, likely because of these homozygous mutations. My health coach actually recommended spirulina because it's super high in superoxide dismutase. So this is something that I recently discovered that I find to be really useful. Arthritis runs in my family pretty heavily, and I have a little bit of arthritis, especially if I eat really unhealthy food. So having something that I can use to guide my behavioral decisions is, I think, really interesting and helpful. And there's bunches of companies that are now trying to scale these personalized nutrigenomics, including MD RevUp, which is in San Diego, Nutopia, which is working with big insurers, and then Arabelle in Seattle, as well as Human Longevity Inc. And what all these are doing, they're taking genetics, laboratory markers, and behavioral markers, and combining that with a health coach that will give you actionable recommendations to improve your health. What I want to see in the future is I want to see a search engine of my body. I want to see the MRI data, I want to see my lab data, I want to see my genetics data, all my quantified self data, and I want to be able to ask questions to this database. And because right now what I'm doing in my practice is really time consuming and really expensive. So what I'm hoping for is that one of these companies, Arabelle and Human Longevity, figures out a way to enable all of us to query our bodies with laboratory information and other types. So an example of this would be, let's say I have a patient who wants to reduce her breast cancer risk. And we test her urinary hormones, and we find that she's got an elevated estrogen quotient. So she's got too many of the bad estrogens and too little of the good estrogens. And she's a BRCA carrier as well as a CYP1A1 mutation, which basically is designed to metabolize carcinogenic estrogens. And she's eating few green vegetables. So what I would recommend in this case is actually increasing the intake of cruciferous vegetables, because these are going to upregulate the enzyme that she has a mutation in and actually help reduce the number of toxic estrogens in her body. But that's the future. Let's return back to reality. How do we get people to eat more fruits and vegetables? How do we get people to eat more high-quality whole foods? And how do we get people nutrition tailored to their health problems or their health goals? And how do we convince policymakers that food is medicine? The big issues I see that people are dealing with, even my well-off clients, is how do you actually make healthy food convenient? Because grocery shopping takes time, cooking and meal planning takes time, and food is expensive. But what I really am excited about is there are so many companies in the Bay Area that are making these things easier for all of us. For example, grocery delivery through Grub Market, Good Eggs, Instacart, Farm Fresh to You. They're literally taking the farmer's market, which a lot of people may not have time to go on their Sundays. They're going and they're bringing it to your house. And then there's meal planning boxes like HelloFresh, Blue Apron, plated side basket, and they're combining, basically taking the work out of meal planning by putting a meal in a box and giving you a recipe and instructions and teaching you how to cook. And then there's even meal delivery options, which are great because for a lot of people who work in tech, especially people who are founders, cooking is the last thing they have time for. And I actually recommend a lot of my clients that they start with this. They start with a meal delivery service because, frankly, they're so overwhelmed and overworked that they need something that's easy and fast.
Molly, we have a meal delivery service here that's going to be feeding us after the third presentation, Meal Made.
There you go.
They deliver paleo meals.
That's awesome.
So we'll be eating paleo food tonight.
I'd love to include them. So let's talk a bit about food as medicine. So I've been following a lot of different running theories on how to reverse chronic disease with diet. And one of the most interesting stories is Terry Walls, who is an internal medicine doctor, found herself debilitated with MS and unable to work. So she laid in bed, sick, and did serious research on the underpinnings and the root causes of MS. She was actually able to reverse her MS, and now she has created an institute around teaching people how to do this for themselves. Ornish from UCSF, he studied cardiovascular disease and found that by putting people on a plant-based diet, he could actually reverse atherosclerosis. And there's a great group on Facebook called Type 1 Grit, and it's a bunch of people with type 1 diabetes who are using ketogenic diets to control their diabetes and lower their insulin needs. The cool thing is in the Bay Area, we're really lucky. We can go to Mission Heirloom in Berkeley and order off of Good Eggs and get autoimmune paleo diet sent to your house. You can actually get a vegan or plant-based diets, even vegetarian plant-based diets from Thistle Juice. It's a great company, and you can get that delivered. Let's say you have a family member who has cardiovascular disease. Or if you have type 1 diabetes, there are even companies, they're not in, I'm trying to think of the name, Farm Hill Paleo. They're not available in San Francisco or Oakland yet, but they do offer paleo diets, and some of their meals are ketogenic. This to me is pretty remarkable. The American Diabetes Association recommends that people with diabetes consume large quantities of grains and carbs. It's actually in the recommendations. But you've got people going online and banding together through social media and finding that they can do a better job of managing their numbers than their doctors. Having worn a continuous glucose monitor before, I think it's really useful tool. Someday we're all going to have these. It's within the next 5 years we'll be able to wear them. But this is happening. This is people legitimately lowering their insulin needs through diet. But let's really think about the cost here. So the cost of chronic disease, let's say type 2 diabetes for a year, is around $15,000. It's not a cheap disease to have. And it's debilitating. You end up becoming a zombie if you let it go long enough. You end up losing limbs and toes, and it's terrible. It ruins your vision and your kidneys. But the cost of food, let's say you order Thistle Juice, you've got diabetes, and you order Thistle, and it's $10 a meal, 3 meals a day, that's $10,000 a year. That's $5,000 cheaper than the drugs that your doctor is giving you. So type 2 diabetes, I think, maybe not type 1 is reversible, but type 2 can be reversed in its early stages. And the cool thing is that the payment systems in medicine are changing so as though, including this company called Remedy Partners, that what they're doing is they're giving doctors a certain amount of money to spend per patient per year. And the doctor can spend the money however they think is best for the client. And what this company is doing is finding that giving a patient with serious chronic disease a nutritionist and access to exercise classes, yoga, and healthy food is actually more effective than some of the drugs that they're giving, and sometimes even cheaper. So, in conclusion, let thy food be thy medicine, and let thy medicine be thy food. Thanks. Questions?
Do you have any favorite food logging apps that we should be using?
I have tried so many food logging apps, and the honest to God truth is that the best food logging app is actually having a buddy who you text all your food to. So one of my clients, I tried to give her food tracking apps, and she just didn't do it. She wouldn't do it, and she needed to, because we've managed to control her inflammatory bowel disease with nutrition alone. And she did not want to go back on medication. So I said, okay, if you want to do the hard way, The hard way is we really look at your diet. So she texts me everything she eats. And doing this over the last month has really changed her food. So if you're going to do a meal tracking app, do one that snaps the photos and gives you some sort of feedback. There's a few that I can't think of the names off the top of my head because I kind of scrapped them because I just didn't find them super useful for me. But there's, what I'll do is I'll post them to my Twitter after this because I have a list somewhere on my computer.
But that's better. It's better to give your friend a heads up on what you're
even if it's not your, well, so here's the thing, not necessarily your friend, but if you have there's apps that enable you to have a social connection, so you can show people, you want some sort of accountability.
Yeah.
That's like the key to food tracking, is actually not doing it on your own, but having an accountability. So there's there's an app that literally is a nutritionist behind the app that has a team of nutritionists that are staring at your meals, and I'll find the name of it. But that's the kind of app you want. It's something that's interactive. You might have to pay a little bit for it.
Sounds useful.
But you want an app that gives you a connection to a person, whether it's a community of people who are going to give you feedback or a professional that can give you feedback. Because just tracking your food for the sake of tracking your food is usually not that effective. But if you are going to track your food for an assessment on something like macronutrients, I would recommend MyFitnessPal and doing like a week of tracking, and then using that as a diagnostic tool to find out what you need to change. But I don't really recommend tracking every day because I think it's tedious. So, but it really is useful tracking it for like 3 days to a week and just seeing, because like, for example, I was tracking my own food for 3 days, and I just found that my protein was super low. And I thought, okay, this is not good. This is probably why my energy levels aren't as high. So it gave me the impetus to improve my protein. But if you don't quantify, you don't know what you're doing. So the first step is find out what you're eating. Second step is find some sort of accountability through an app or a nutritionist where you can have real-time feedback.
Would the more extended blood panel tests that you're talking about be better to track your food? It just kind of shows you.
Yeah, honestly, so it kind of depends on the issues you have with food, right? The person with the inflammatory bowel problem has issues around, like a lot of emotional issues around food. But if you are trying to really see if your nutrition or your diet is making a difference in your health, a really great example of this is the Micronutrient Test, because I show people how many nutrients that they're deficient in, and they're like, I thought I was eating so healthy. I'm like, well, you're deficient in zinc and selenium and vitamin and like all these different vitamins, and it's like you can't possibly be eating all the fruits and vegetables you're eating if you're deficient in all these. So I really like the micronutrient testing, and I also really like particle numbers and particle size testing for lipids, because it's a bit more of nuanced of interpretation of your blood fats. And then another good one is CRP, C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation, and it really does correlate quite well with food.
Those more expanded tests, are they generally covered by insurance?
They are in a lot of cases, or the prices are at least cheaper with insurance. I use a company called Cleveland Heart Lab and SpectraCell for micronutrients, and Cleveland Heart Lab and Boston Heart Lab definitely have lower costs of labs. So insurance does help. Usually you need a PPO rather than an HMO. Kaiser doesn't usually get you a cheaper rate. But question?
How much does it cost to do all those tests?
Right now, too much. So AirAvail, I'm in their program, and I joined their program because I wanted to get my clinical exome, and the cost of a clinical exome plus the labs is way more than what they're charging. But I got in early, and they're actually taking a loss. So for them to do the clinical exome 3 times labs per year, microbiome, and then salivary cortisol, it's around, for them, their cost was around $5K. But my costs are lower because I usually use 23andMe, and then I run it through an interpretive reader to identify trends.
Which one do you use?
I have so many. I'm actually building one right now. I'm like, I need to build one for my practice because it's like nothing I have is good enough. But the cool thing is that there aren't that many really useful markers. I really like Prometheus.
That's what I've used.
But that's mostly for looking for genetic risks of disease. It's not super great for wellness. But XY Leap out of New Zealand is really good. And you can use that today. I really like that company. I should have included that. Yeah?
Can you
I do test the microbiome using a company called Genova Diagnostics, the GI effects panel, and then I'm testing out another company right now, but I can't, because I like to do parasitology along with the microbiome is useful to know the landscape, but then I also want to understand things like eosinophil protein X, calprotectin. There's a bunch of other markers you can get that are more actionable than just the microbiome.
Do you think you've finally gotten to a point where you now know what your body needs? Like, have you done enough testing?
But
do you think it's kind of like it can never end because you never stop aging or changing or being in a different environment? Or can you get to a point where you should know what's going to happen if you do X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I mean, after the last few years of doing crazy numbers of labs in my body, I mean, I've tested a lot of companies. And I can honestly say that the number one thing that I have to control, like the number one thing I control for is food, then sleep, and then exercise, and stress management. But like, all these things seem so basic, but when you actually start quantifying them and measuring them and doing questionnaires and asking yourself like how many stressful experiences have I had in the last year and how has that affected my health? And I mean, it really never ends. But the cool thing is it gets easier. It gets like what I've noticed is that my ability to change behavior is so rapid now. Like I can set a goal, I can measure, and I can see an outcome way quicker than I used to be able to do. And I used to set like maybe 1 to 5 New Year's resolutions. Usually I have like around 10, and a good number of those are on my health. And it gets so much easier to implement those when I have data driving the outcome. But I'm a very rational human, so it's actually the cool thing that I've learned the most from all this information is it's taught me how to feel my body and actually recognize like starting to correlate like what's actually happening in my body internally, and then also how do I feel during that time I got that lab test done.
How is what you do the same or different from what a functional medicine physician would do?
I actually am the digital health advisor to the Institute of Functional Medicine, so a lot of what I do is based off of the tenets of functional medicine. However, I'm trying to create structure around it, whereas I think a lot of medicine, the way it's practiced today, is very trial and error. Just like, I mean, it's just like, I think you have this, let's try this. Whereas I write 20-page reports on my patients, and that's like my guidelines. It's like, this is where you are, this is where you could go if you do this, and this is what you could do to intervene to prevent that from happening. So it's really deeply personal, but I'm hoping that there's this great article for entrepreneurs called Do Things That Don't Scale. And it's all about how you should start with small things that, not even small things, but start with things that are complicated and time-consuming and expensive, and then figure out what works, and then figure out how to scale it for the masses. So someday I want to build software that will make this easier for everybody, but I'm just not there yet. So.
How do you like, I noticed that you change very differently depending on, for example, type of activity. Like it's one thing you feel like
Yeah, activity is a big one.
in the sun, another thing you what you're missing and how you compensate for what you're missing.
So I quantify activity using there's a bunch of really well-established metrics on how to quantify activity. So you quantify your basal metabolic rate, and then how much activity you're getting, and then that will help basically convert what the difference is in calories you should be consuming. Because most of the time I don't talk about calories.
Not just the calories, I'm talking about what sorts of chemicals you may be losing.
Oh yeah, so a lot of athletes they drink a lot of water when they're exercising, and they know they shouldn't drink Gatorade, but they forget about electrolytes. So a big one I do with the athletes is making sure that they have a high quality electrolyte solution when they exercise. And I mean, the athletes it's kind of, so when I think about the human body, I think about like normal people, then there's athletes, and then there's like super high-powered executives, which are kind of like athletes, but they have a lot more like intellectual tasks that are stressful. And then there's like children, and then really old people. So everyone sort of falls in different categories of like how do you optimize the health. So optimizing the health of an athlete is not the same as optimizing the health of a typical person. They have different needs, and this is like I could give it another hour-long presentation on this.
I think it's different from activity to activity, not just within athletes.
Yeah, so I actually presented at Red Bull recently. Not recently, about a year ago, because they have an entire esports department, and so like, how do you optimize the health of an esports player? So a person playing video games all day, And I actually created an entire wellness presentation on comparing them to pilots and fighter pilots, and what are the needs, like what are their brain functional needs that they need to be thinking about to change their outcome of their game. It really comes down to sort of first principles. Like, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve? What are you trying to optimize for? And when you start breaking it, starting from that specific section, it's like they're trying to optimize for reaction time through their working memory, things like that. And then you start moving backwards, like, okay, so what can I do to optimize those specific things? It's really just science. I'm a huge fan of supplements when you have a reason to use them. So I like to measure micronutrients on all my clients, because that's a great starting point on nutrients. It's like, what are you obviously deficient in? One of my clients was so healthy and had an amazing diet, but the two micronutrients that she was deficient in were serine, which is a precursor for phosphatidylserine. Serine is an amino acid, and then another one was pantothenic acid, B5. And these are really important for stress response, and these get depleted during stress. So it was a nice way for me to show her that actually her biggest issue is not her nutrition, but it's her stress. So we need to work on optimizing her for improving that. So one example is phosphatidylserine is a great supplement for lowering cortisol. So if you're really wired at night and you need to you're too tired, 300 milligrams of that is a really great tool. So I use supplements, but the first and foremost step of optimizing your health is not grabbing pills, bottles. It's actually looking at your meal timing. Are you eating like regular meals? Are you getting enough hydration? Are you getting good sleep? Are you getting exercise? Are you doing the basic stuff? And if you don't realize how important those are, and you think supplements are going to just fix everything, then you're missing the point. But I do have like a very systematic approach to how I do prescribe supplements. So if somebody's gut isn't healthy, then I have a program for that. If their stress is out of control, we have a program for that. If they want to optimize their brain function, there's another system for that. So I try to systematize everything, and then the last things are things like how is their liver and kidney working for detoxifying chemicals, and then how is their mitochondria working for energy. But I try to save those for those are tweaks. Those are not like first line approaches. I think it's really useful for a lot of people. I think it's very unnatural for humans to be eating every day, 3 meals a day. So even if you do it 1 day a month, that's better than nothing. Some of my clients do really, really well in intermittent fasting, and then for some people, like women don't always do as well, because I feel like women's bodies are somewhat. I should take that back. I do know some women who do remarkably well with it, but they're outliers, and they're like super hyper optimized athletes, and they just have a totally different relationship with their bodies. But the general population of women don't always do as well, but men seem to do really well with it. But like I said, it's like experimentation. It's what works for your body.
I started it today, actually.
I think it's more of a natural state to not be eating than to be eating 24/7, but try telling that to the population of people who lives to eat, you know?
I had to use MCT oil in order to supplement, so that way, because I was feeling hungry this morning.
Yeah.
I really was. But again, it's my first time doing it. Your body will get used to these routines that you go through.
I have friends who swear by alpha lipoic acid and caffeine, but I've never tried it, so I don't know.
I swear by caffeine, but I don't know.
Other than Tufts,
Mm-hmm.
what's a good place that you look, like a source for information you look to every day or every week?
So I really like this blog called Authority Nutrition and Examine.com. They're really approachable. The Authority Nutrition is based out of Iceland. It's like a doctor out of Iceland, and he's got a team of people. But institutionally, it's really. I wish I could say that we could trust the American Cardiology Association, but we can't, because they've been recommending totally false recommendation. What they've been recommending us has actually caused us to have more heart disease. So I wouldn't recommend following them, but I would say I like Andrew Weil for older. He speaks pretty much to older people, but he's got a great website. I really like his website. I don't think anybody's right on everything. I don't think there's any perfect solution to nutrition. But I think it's nice to get a nice broad array of recommendations. Examine.com has a bunch of like PhDs writing it, and I know the people there, and I like what they do. But like anything else, the thing about science is that it's only as good as the data set you have to build evidence on. So everybody who's compiling the evidence, these meta-analyses, is doing their best they can to find the papers that match those keywords, and then analyzing those papers and coming up with some generalized conclusions. So it's hard to say if there's any perfect solution to this information problem, which is why I think self-experimentation should be welcomed and should be part of medicine.
And that's our mantra.
All right.
Self-experimentation. So, thank you. I've got, before I introduce our next speaker, I've got something very unconventional right now. Marcus, I'm going to hand you these two.
Yeah, thank you.
In your right hand, it's a gray shirt. That's a shirt that I worked out in 3 days ago.
Okay.
In your other hand is a shirt that I worked out, it's a green shirt, from Y Athletics that I worked out in today and yesterday. And what they create is a no-stink-proof, like, athletic shirt and socks. And I'm going to have him pass it around because this is insane, but you can see the difference. Okay. Yeah, you want to stop. So, I'm sorry? Well, you'll find out, right? Do I have a strong order? We'll find out.
Yeah, one is a lot lighter.
One of these is a lot lighter.
Yeah.
Probably the Y Athletic shirt because it's not going to retain. It doesn't retain water very easily. It doesn't retain the perspiration. What's that? Oh, the company is Y Athletics. So I've written it up there, but it would be like yathletics.com. And we're gonna do a giveaway later on after the last presentation. But right now, what I want to do is introduce